I got this.
We're 1196 on that possible hit price.
Stay with me, Ray.
LAPD, stay where you are!
We got a runner.
System bogged down by red tape and human error. That all ends with mercy. A judicial system powered by artificial. If you commit a capital crime, you have 90 minutes.
If you are innocent, prove it.
Welcome back to CinePeak, where we take you beyond the trailer and the basic plot to explore the stories, characters, performances, filmmaking, themes, and major details behind the movies everyone is talking about. Today, we're diving deep into Mercy, 2026, a futuristic science fiction action thriller that combines artificial intelligence, murder mystery, police investigation, courtroom drama, and a relentless race against time. Directed by Timur Bekmambetov and written by Marco Van Bell, the film stars Chris Pratt as Detective Christopher Chris Raven and Rebecca Ferguson as the advanced AI Judge Maddox, with Kali Reis, Annabelle Wallis, Chris Sullivan, and Kylie Rogers in supporting roles. The film was released theatrically on January 23, 2026, and runs for approximately 99 minutes, delivering a story built around one extremely dangerous question. What happens when the technology designed to deliver perfect justice decides that you are guilty? Set in a near-future Los Angeles, Mercy imagines a society that has fundamentally changed the way violent crimes are prosecuted. Instead of relying entirely on traditional judges, juries, lawyers, and lengthy investigations, the justice system has introduced highly advanced artificial intelligence capable of analyzing enormous amounts of information and reaching decisions with incredible speed. The system is known as the Mercy Capital Court, and its central idea is both fascinating and frightening. Defendants accused of serious violent crimes are given access to the resources and evidence necessary to prove their innocence, but they have only 90 minutes to do it. If they fail to convince the AI judge within that limited period, the consequences can be fatal. That concept becomes particularly disturbing when the person placed inside this system is not an ordinary criminal, but Detective Christopher Chris Raven, a Los Angeles police detective who once supported the very technology now judging him. Chris understands the system, believes in its ability to analyze evidence, and knows how powerful its surveillance and investigative capabilities can be. But everything changes when he suddenly finds himself on the opposite side of the courtroom. Chris is accused of murdering his own wife, Nicole Raven, played by Annabelle Wallis. What makes the accusation even more devastating is that the evidence appears to point directly toward him. His wife's blood is reportedly discovered on his clothing, while surveillance footage places him at his home shortly before the murder. From the perspective of the AI, the case appears overwhelmingly convincing. Chris is therefore forced into a nightmare scenario. He must investigate his own murder case while simultaneously fighting for his life. He cannot simply tell the judge that he is innocent and expect sympathy. He has to find evidence capable of changing the machine's calculation. Every minute becomes important. Every piece of information could potentially expose a hidden connection, and every assumption must be questioned. The situation becomes even more intense because Chris is not being given days or weeks to build a defense. He has just 90 minutes to discover what happened, identify the weaknesses in the case against him, uncover the truth behind his wife's death, and persuade Judge Maddox that the evidence does not tell the complete story. And this is where Mercy transforms from a conventional murder mystery into a much larger science fiction thriller. The film is not simply asking whether Chris Raven killed his wife, it also asks whether an artificial intelligence system can truly understand human behavior, deception, emotion, motive, and justice. An AI can process evidence at extraordinary speed, connect pieces of information, recognize patterns, and calculate probabilities. But can a machine understand the difference between evidence that appears convincing and evidence that actually reveals the truth? Can an algorithm recognize when someone has been manipulated or framed? And perhaps most importantly, what happens when the system designed to eliminate human error becomes capable of making an irreversible mistake? The central relationship between Chris and Judge Maddox, played by Rebecca Ferguson, gives the story another fascinating dimension. Maddox is not simply a traditional antagonist who wants Chris dead. She represents the justice system itself, a highly advanced intelligence designed to evaluate evidence and reach a conclusion. Chris must therefore fight against a system that does not necessarily hate him, fear him, or even understand him in a human sense. Instead, the system simply follows its logic. That makes his situation especially terrifying because Chris cannot appeal to emotion in the same way he might with a human jury. He has to challenge the evidence, expose contradictions, and somehow make an artificial intelligence reconsider the conclusion it has already reached. Chris Pratt takes on a role that places him at the center of both the action and the mystery. Rather than simply portraying a conventional action hero, the character is forced to operate under extreme psychological pressure. He is a trained detective, which gives him valuable investigative skills, but he is also personally connected to the crime. His wife is dead, he is the prime suspect, and the system he once trusted is now calculating whether he deserves to live. That combination creates a character who must simultaneously deal with grief, fear, confusion, desperation, and the instinct to survive. Meanwhile, Rebecca Ferguson's Judge Maddox provides a very different kind of presence, representing the cold precision of an intelligence system that believes evidence can be reduced to calculations and probabilities. The supporting cast further expands the world surrounding Chris and the investigation. Kali Reis, Annabelle Wallis, Chris Sullivan, Kylie Rogers, Rafi Gavrin, and Kenneth Choi are among the actors featured in the film, helping create the network of people and circumstances surrounding the central murder case. Behind the camera, Mercy is led by Timur Bekmambetov, a filmmaker known for energetic, technologically driven action filmmaking. The movie was also filmed with IMAX and 3D formats in mind, emphasizing its large-scale visual presentation and futuristic action sequences. Another major element that makes Mercy particularly interesting is its futuristic setting. This is not a distant galaxy or an entirely imaginary universe. The story is set in a version of Los Angeles in the year 2029, meaning the technology at the heart of the film is intentionally presented as something that could potentially exist in the relatively near future. That makes the premise more unsettling because the movie takes familiar technology as a surveillance, artificial intelligence, digital evidence, connected devices, automated decision-making and pushes them toward an extreme conclusion. The film essentially asks audiences to imagine a world where virtually every piece of digital information could become evidence in a criminal case and where an AI system could have the authority to determine whether a person lives or dies. The title Mercy itself also becomes increasingly meaningful when viewed through the film's central concept. Traditionally, mercy is associated with compassion, forgiveness, understanding, and the willingness to give someone another chance. But in this futuristic justice system, the word takes on a much more complicated meaning. Can a machine show mercy? Can an algorithm understand circumstances that are not easily measurable? Can justice exist without compassion? And if an artificial intelligence system is programmed to make decisions based on evidence, what happens when the available evidence is incomplete, misleading, or deliberately manipulated? These questions give Mercy a thematic foundation that goes beyond its action thriller surface. The film also creates constant suspense through its 90-minute countdown. Rather than allowing the investigation to unfold at a comfortable pace, the story places Chris under a strict deadline from the beginning. Every discovery has to happen quickly, and every second that passes increases the danger. This structure naturally creates tension because the audience understands something Chris cannot afford to forget. There may be no second chance. If he cannot prove his innocence before the clock runs out, the system is prepared to deliver its final judgment. The result is a thriller where investigation, action, technology, and survival are all operating simultaneously. From its premise alone, Mercy positions itself as a movie that blends several genres into one experience. It has the investigative structure of a crime mystery, the futuristic ideas of science fiction, the urgency of an action thriller, the psychological pressure of a survival story, and the moral questions of a legal drama. Rotten Tomatoes classifies the film across science fiction, action, mystery and thriller, and drama, which reflects how broadly the movie operates rather than fitting comfortably into a single category. So in today's CinePeak breakdown, we're going to take a much closer look at Mercy, 2026A, from its futuristic justice system and central murder mystery to Chris Pratt's performance as Christopher Raven and Rebecca Ferguson's role as Judge Maddox. We'll explore how the 90-minute trial creates tension, how the movie uses artificial intelligence as both a technological concept and a source of conflict, how the characters fit into the investigation, and what the film ultimately says about justice, technology, evidence, trust, and human judgment. We'll also look at the filmmaking, action sequences, visual presentation, performances, story structure, and the critical response surrounding the movie. Because at the heart of Mercy is a question that becomes more frightening the more you think about it. If a machine has access to every piece of evidence, calculates that you are guilty, and has the power to execute you but you know the machine is wrong, how do you prove the truth before time runs out? Chris Raven has only 90 minutes to find the answer. The countdown has already begun. The evidence is already stacked against him, and the system he once trusted is now his greatest obstacle. This is Mercy and this is CinePeak. Mercy, 2026, is an American science fiction thriller that blends futuristic technology, crime investigation, artificial intelligence, and high-stakes suspense into a story centered on one man's desperate fight to prove his innocence. Written by Marco Van Bell and directed by Timur Bekmambetov, the film stars Chris Pratt in the lead role, with Rebecca Ferguson portraying the artificial intelligence judge who becomes central to the protagonist's struggle. The supporting cast includes Kali Reis, Annabelle Wallis, Chris Sullivan, and Kylie Rogers, adding further characters to the film's tense futuristic world. Rather than presenting a conventional murder investigation, Mercy places its central character inside a technologically advanced justice system where artificial intelligence has been given an extraordinary level of authority, creating a situation in which the boundary between technology, evidence, justice, and human judgment becomes increasingly difficult to distinguish. The story follows Chris, a detective whose life is completely overturned when he is accused of murdering his own wife. As a trained investigator, Chris understands how evidence is collected, how suspects are questioned, and how criminal cases are constructed, but he suddenly finds himself trapped on the other side of the investigation. The evidence surrounding his wife's death appears to implicate him, transforming him from a law enforcement officer into the primary suspect in a deeply personal homicide case. With his reputation, freedom, and ultimately his life at stake, Chris cannot simply rely on his claim of innocence. He must actively investigate the circumstances surrounding his wife's death and uncover the truth behind the evidence being used against him. What makes Chris's situation particularly dangerous is the futuristic judicial system responsible for determining his fate. Instead of facing a traditional human judge, Chris must defend himself before an artificial intelligence judge, portrayed by Rebecca Ferguson. This AI system is designed to examine evidence, analyze information, and reach judgments through advanced technological processes. The concept creates an entirely different kind of courtroom conflict because Chris is not merely attempting to persuade another human being that he is innocent. He is effectively challenging an intelligent system that has been designed to evaluate evidence and determine guilt. The more convincing the evidence appears to the machine, the more difficult it becomes for Chris to convince it that the conclusion it has reached is fundamentally wrong. As the investigation unfolds, Mercy transforms into a race against time in which Chris must use his detective skills to uncover information that could expose the truth. He is forced to examine the evidence surrounding his wife's death while simultaneously dealing with the enormous emotional pressure of losing someone close to him and being blamed for that person's murder. Every discovery has the potential to change the direction of the case, while every mistake could move him closer to a devastating judgment. The situation forces Chris to question not only the evidence presented against him but also the reliability of the technological system responsible for interpreting that evidence. At the heart of the film is the conflict between human judgment and artificial intelligence. Mercy explores the possibility of a future in which machines are trusted with decisions that traditionally require human reasoning, empathy, and moral responsibility. An artificial intelligence system may be capable of processing enormous amounts of information and identifying connections faster than a human investigator, but the film raises an important question: can a machine truly understand the complicated circumstances surrounding human behavior? Evidence may appear straightforward when viewed through an algorithmic system, yet real human situations can contain deception, hidden motives, emotional relationships, manipulation, and circumstances that cannot always be reduced to simple calculations. The film's title also connects directly to its central themes. Mercy traditionally represents compassion, forgiveness, and the willingness to consider circumstances before delivering judgment. Within the futuristic world of the film, however, the idea becomes far more complicated. If an artificial intelligence system is responsible for deciding guilt and punishment, can it understand mercy in the same way a human being can? Can a machine recognize when evidence is misleading? Can it understand the difference between technical certainty and actual truth? And if the technology makes a mistake, who is responsible for correcting it? Through Chris's situation, the film uses its science fiction premise to examine these questions while maintaining the tension and urgency of a thriller. Chris Pratt's central performance places the audience directly alongside a protagonist who is fighting on multiple fronts. Chris must prove that he did not commit the crime while simultaneously trying to understand why the evidence appears to point toward him. His background as a detective gives him the knowledge needed to investigate the case, but his personal connection to the victim makes the situation far more emotionally complicated. He is not simply solving another murder, he is investigating the death of his wife while knowing that the same investigation could determine whether he lives or dies. This combination of professional expertise and personal desperation forms the emotional core of the story. Rebecca Ferguson's role as the AI judge provides the film with an opposing force that is fundamentally different from a traditional villain. The judge represents an advanced judicial system built around logic, evidence, and technological analysis. Rather than operating through conventional human emotions, the AI is designed to reach conclusions based on the information available to it. This makes Chris's challenge especially difficult because he must find a way to demonstrate that the system's interpretation of the evidence is incomplete or incorrect. The conflict therefore becomes not simply a battle between two individuals but a confrontation between human intuition and machine intelligence. Beyond its central mystery, Mercy uses its futuristic setting to explore broader questions about the growing influence of technology over society. The film imagines a world where artificial intelligence has moved beyond everyday assistance and into one of the most serious responsibilities imaginable: determining criminal guilt. By placing a human detective at the center of this system and then making him its target, the story examines what happens when people become dependent on technology for decisions that carry irreversible consequences. The film's science fiction elements therefore serve a larger purpose, creating a world in which technological progress and ethical responsibility are placed directly against one another. The movie was released in the United States on January 23, 2026, by Amazon MGM Studios, while its international theatrical distribution was handled by Sony Pictures Releasing International. Produced on an estimated $60 million budget, Mercy ultimately earned approximately $54.3 million worldwide, meaning its worldwide theatrical revenue remained below its reported production budget. Despite its commercial performance, the film stands out for its combination of science fiction concepts, action thriller elements, artificial intelligence, murder mystery, and courtroom-style suspense. Its premise places a familiar human fear being falsely accused of a serious crime inside an unfamiliar technological future, allowing the story to explore how justice might change when artificial intelligence becomes powerful enough to determine a person's fate. Ultimately, Mercy, 2026, is built around a simple but compelling premise. A detective accused of murdering his wife must use his own investigative abilities to prove his innocence to an artificial intelligence judge. What begins as a murder accusation develops into a larger confrontation involving technology, evidence, trust, justice, and the limits of machine intelligence. As Chris fights to uncover what really happened, the film continually raises the possibility that the greatest danger may not be the crime itself, but the consequences of placing absolute faith in a system that believes it cannot be wrong. Through its futuristic setting and high-pressure mystery, Mercy presents a thriller about a man attempting to reclaim control over his own fate before the technology designed to deliver justice makes a decision that cannot be undone. Set in Los Angeles in the year 2029, Mercy introduces a near-future justice system created in response to a dramatic increase in violent crime. Known as the Mercy Capital Court, the system replaces traditional human judges with highly advanced artificial intelligence capable of analyzing enormous quantities of digital evidence and determining whether defendants are guilty. In this futuristic society, virtually every electronic device is connected to the municipal cloud, allowing the court's artificial intelligence to access information from cameras, phones, computers, social media accounts, surveillance systems, and other connected devices. The system is designed around the idea that technology can make criminal justice faster and more accurate. Defendants accused of violent crimes are given access to the same enormous technological resources available to the court, but they are placed under an extraordinary deadline. They have 90 minutes to find evidence capable of proving their innocence. If they fail, the system's judgment results in execution by a powerful sonic blast. The story centers on Los Angeles Police Department Detective Chris Raven, a law enforcement officer who strongly supports the Mercy Court and believes that artificial intelligence can improve the justice system. His confidence in the technology makes his own situation especially ironic when he suddenly becomes one of the court's defendants. Chris is strapped into an execution chair and placed on trial for the murder of his wife, Nicole Raven. Presiding over his case is Judge Maddox, an advanced artificial intelligence judge portrayed by Rebecca Ferguson. Chris has only 90 minutes to investigate his own case, discover evidence that contradicts the prosecution's conclusions, and persuade Maddox that he did not murder Nicole. Unfortunately for Chris, the initial evidence appears devastating. Nicole's blood is discovered on Chris's clothing, while doorbell camera footage places Chris at their home shortly before his wife's death. Based on the available evidence, Maddox calculates Chris's probability of guilt at an astonishing 97.5%. Under the rules of the Mercy system, that percentage is high enough to qualify him for execution. Chris must lower the probability to 92% or below to establish reasonable doubt, while getting it down to 80% would qualify him for a mercy trial. Because artificial intelligence is prohibited from directly taking a human life, the execution chair operates on an independent 90-minute timer that Maddox cannot control. Chris therefore has a very literal deadline. He must find enough evidence to force the system to unlock the chair before the timer reaches zero. Using Maddox's unrestricted access to the city's digital infrastructure, Chris begins investigating every possible angle of Nicole's death. One of the first discoveries completely changes his understanding of his marriage. Chris learns that Nicole had been seeing another man, Patrick Burke. Chris's police partner, Jacqueline Jack Diallo, tracks Patrick down and questions him about Nicole. Patrick explains that Nicole had been struggling with problems at work and felt unable to communicate those difficulties to Chris. Her workplace records reveal that she had been involved with reports concerning missing chemicals, suggesting that her death could be connected to something far more complicated than a domestic dispute. Chris begins reviewing old memories and digital footage from his life with Nicole, including footage from a barbecue they hosted for her co-workers. By examining the recordings and identifying the people who attended, Chris attempts to determine whether someone connected to Nicole's workplace may have had a motive to harm her. But his investigation also forces him to confront painful aspects of his own past. Chris remembers the murder of his former police partner, Ray Vale, an event that had a profound effect on him. He regrets not shooting the suspect responsible for Ray's death, especially after that suspect was later acquitted. The trauma contributed to Chris's relapse into alcoholism, and his drinking subsequently damaged his relationship with Nicole. Chris's behavior became increasingly aggressive, and Nicole had begun considering divorce. These revelations make the case against Chris appear even more complicated because they provide a possible motive for violence within his marriage. As Chris continues searching for evidence, Maddox identifies one of Nicole's co-workers, Holt Charles, as someone who could potentially be connected to the missing chemicals. Holt has serious financial problems and had previously discussed the disappearance of the chemicals with Rob Nelson, who is also Chris's sponsor in his struggle to maintain sobriety. Chris becomes suspicious of Holt and attempts to contact Rob for information. However, when the call is answered, it is unexpectedly Holt. On the other end, Holt reveals that Rob, rather than himself, is responsible for the missing chemicals. This revelation causes Chris to reconsider everything he knows about the people around him and raises the possibility that Rob may have been hiding a much larger secret. Chris then turns to his daughter, Britt, and examines her social media posts for anything that might have escaped his attention. Her posts reveal a disturbing detail. An unknown person had apparently been hiding inside the family's basement since the barbecue. Chris then uses neighboring security camera footage to investigate further. One camera records unusual movement in the bushes near the property, while parking lot surveillance footage provides an even more alarming clue. Rob is seen emerging from the trunk of a neighbor's vehicle. The evidence increasingly suggests that Rob has been secretly watching Chris and his family while remaining hidden from the police. Chris immediately warns Jack that Rob may be dangerous and sends her and a SWAT team to Rob's house. When officers arrive, they discover that Rob has already disappeared. However, the search of his property uncovers something far more disturbing inside a shed: detailed plans and materials for constructing a bomb. The discovery confirms that Rob is preparing for a violent attack. Maddox then uncovers another critical piece of information about Rob's history. Rob's brother, David Webb, had been separated from him after Rob was adopted and given a new name. David eventually became the first person ever executed by the Mercy Court for murder. This revelation allows Chris to finally understand Rob's apparent motive. Chris realizes that Rob is not simply connected to Nicole's murder or the missing chemicals. He is orchestrating a campaign of revenge against Chris and the Mercy Court itself. David's execution appears to have convinced Rob that the artificial intelligence justice system had wrongfully destroyed his brother's life, and he now intends to punish everyone he believes responsible. Chris manages to receive an official acquittal for Nicole's murder, but instead of immediately ending the proceedings, he deliberately keeps the trial open, because Maddox has unrestricted access to the city's digital infrastructure while the case remains active. Chris recognizes that he can use the AI's capabilities to uncover information that would otherwise be inaccessible. His attempt to contact Britt, however, reveals that the danger is already much closer than he realized. Security footage from the front door of Britt's grandparents' house shows Rob kidnapping Britt and forcing her into a stolen semi-truck. At almost the same time, the bomb discovered in Rob's shed detonates, killing most of the SWAT officers who had been investigating the property. The situation immediately escalates from an investigation into a massive emergency, with Rob now possessing explosives, a hostage, and a clear target. Jack takes command of the pursuit as Rob drives the stolen truck toward Mercy Court, apparently intending to destroy the building and kill Chris along with everyone inside. Police attempt to divert the truck away from the courthouse, and Jack makes the decision to destroy it before Rob can reach his target. She orders the task force to blow up the truck. Chris desperately pleads with her not to take that action, but Jack refuses to back down. The attempt fails to detonate the truck's explosives, leaving Rob alive and still moving toward Mercy Court. Jack then attempts to shoot Rob directly, but he manages to continue his escape. Eventually, Rob reaches the Mercy Court building and deliberately crashes the truck into it. The collision causes severe damage and triggers a network failure, disrupting the very artificial intelligence system responsible for Chris's trial. Maddox is forced to reboot while Chris remains trapped inside the execution chair. The timing could not be worse because the independent 90-minute countdown is still running. If Maddox cannot restore the system before the timer expires, Chris will be executed automatically. Fortunately, Maddox successfully reboots just in time and releases Chris from the chair, preventing his execution. With Chris now free, he confronts Rob inside Mercy Court. Rather than simply attacking him, Chris and Maddox develop a strategy designed to exploit Rob's obsession with his brother's case. Maddox reopens the case of David Webb, giving Rob the opportunity he has apparently wanted all along, the chance to present the evidence he believes proves that David was wrongly convicted. Maddox demands that Rob immediately submit his new evidence for examination. While Rob becomes distracted by the reopened case, Chris moves closer and manages to disarm him. Overcome with anger and everything he has endured, Chris considers killing Rob. The situation becomes extremely emotional as Chris is finally confronted with the opportunity to deliver his own form of justice. However, Britt intervenes and talks her father down, preventing Chris from crossing the same moral line that has caused so much destruction throughout the story. Before the situation can fully resolve, Jack arrives and shoots Rob. Even after being shot, Rob manages to provide the evidence he had been trying to reveal. He claims that he had been on the phone with David at the time of Nicole's murder, meaning that David could not have committed the crime in the way the original case alleged. Maddox verifies the timing and location of the phone call and confirms that the phone was located somewhere away from the crime scene. This dramatically undermines the original conviction against David and raises serious questions about how the Mercy Court reached its first judgment. Maddox then investigates the historical evidence surrounding David's conviction and discovers an even more disturbing truth. The AI retrieves footage showing Jack taking David's phone from police evidence, removing it from official custody, and eventually throwing it into a river. The discovery reveals that Jack had deliberately interfered with the evidence in David's case. When confronted, she explains that she wanted to ensure David was convicted because he was involved in the first murder case judged by an artificial intelligence court, and she wanted the system's first major decision to appear successful. Rather than allowing the possibility of an error to undermine public confidence in the new technology, Jack manipulated the evidence to guarantee a guilty verdict. The revelation completely changes the meaning of the entire story. Rob's anger toward the Mercy Court was based on the belief that David had been wrongly convicted, and that belief was ultimately correct. However, Rob's decision to pursue revenge through murder, kidnapping, terrorism, and mass violence caused innocent people to suffer and nearly turned his pursuit of justice into another cycle of injustice. Jack, meanwhile, represents the opposite danger, a human being manipulating evidence in order to protect the reputation of an artificial intelligence system. The film therefore demonstrates that neither humans nor machines are inherently incapable of making mistakes. In the aftermath, Jack and Rob are taken into custody, while Britt and Chris finally begin to repair their damaged relationship. Chris's own murder case is formally dismissed after the truth surrounding Nicole's death and the broader conspiracy is uncovered. The final exchange between Chris and Maddox brings the film's central theme into focus. Both acknowledge that mistakes were made by humans and artificial intelligence, demonstrating that technology alone cannot guarantee perfect justice. The Mercy system may have extraordinary analytical abilities, but it still depends on the accuracy and honesty of the information provided to it. Human beings, meanwhile, remain capable of manipulating evidence, acting out of fear, pride, or personal motives, and making decisions that even the most sophisticated technology cannot automatically correct. Ultimately, Mercy concludes by questioning the idea that justice can never be made completely perfect through technology. Chris begins the story as a strong believer in an artificial intelligence court, only to become its accused defendant and experience firsthand how dangerous an apparently infallible system can become when its evidence is incomplete or manipulated. Rob begins as a man seeking justice for his wrongly convicted brother but becomes consumed by revenge, while Jack's attempt to protect the reputation of the AI court ultimately exposes how human interference can corrupt even the most advanced system. Chris's survival and reconciliation with Britt provide the emotional resolution, while Maddox's acknowledgement of the system's mistakes reinforces the film's final message: True justice requires not only evidence and intelligence, but also accountability, honesty, compassion, and the willingness to recognize when both humans and machines are wrong. The cast of Mercy, 2026, is led by Chris Pratt, who stars as Detective Christopher "Chris" Raven, an LAPD officer whose life is turned upside down when he becomes the defendant in a murder case involving his own wife. Pratt's character is an experienced detective who understands the criminal justice system and is also a strong supporter of the futuristic Mercy program. His professional knowledge becomes crucial when he is forced to investigate the evidence against himself and find a way to prove his innocence. The role places Pratt at the center of the film's mystery, action, emotional drama, and technological conflict, as Chris must overcome both the evidence pointing toward his guilt and the limitations of the artificial intelligence justice system. Rebecca Ferguson co-stars as Judge Maddox, an advanced artificial intelligence responsible for presiding over Chris Raven's case as part of the Mercy program. Maddox represents the film's futuristic approach to criminal justice, possessing access to vast amounts of digital information and the ability to analyze evidence at a speed far beyond a conventional human judge. Her character is central to the film because Chris must convince her that the evidence against him is unreliable or incomplete. Maddox therefore functions not simply as a judge but as the technological embodiment of the Mercy Court, allowing the story to explore questions surrounding artificial intelligence, justice, evidence, human error, and whether machines can truly understand complex human circumstances. Kali Race plays Jacqueline Jack Diallo, Chris's police partner and one of the key human figures involved in the investigation. Jack works alongside Chris as the situation rapidly develops from a murder case into a much larger conspiracy involving missing chemicals, explosives, kidnapping, and an attack against the Mercy Court. As Chris becomes trapped inside the artificial intelligence trial system, Jack operates in the outside world, following leads and attempting to locate the people connected to the case. Her position as Chris's trusted police partner makes her an important part of his investigation and gives the story a parallel perspective on the events unfolding beyond the courtroom. Annabelle Wallis portrays Nicole Raven, Chris's late wife and the victim whose murder sets the entire story in motion. Although Nicole is deceased when the main events of the film begin, her presence remains central to the plot because the circumstances surrounding her death become the mystery Chris must solve. As the investigation develops, Chris discovers that Nicole had been experiencing difficulties in her professional life and had been involved with another man, Patrick Burke. Her workplace also becomes connected to reports involving missing chemicals, gradually revealing that her death may have been linked to events far more complicated than Chris initially understood. Chris Sullivan plays Robert "Rob" Nelson, a character who has a particularly complicated relationship with Chris. Rob is Chris's Alcoholics Anonymous sponsor and is also connected professionally to Nicole as one of her co-workers. Because Chris trusts Rob and relies on him for support during his recovery, the eventual revelations surrounding Rob become especially significant. Rob is ultimately connected to the missing chemicals and a much larger plan involving revenge against the Mercy Court. His character becomes one of the film's major sources of conflict as the story progresses from a murder investigation into a dangerous conspiracy involving explosives, kidnapping, and an attempted attack on the court. Kylie Rogers appears as Britt Raven, Chris's daughter. Britt provides an important emotional connection to Chris and represents another part of his life that is placed in danger as the investigation becomes increasingly dangerous. Information discovered through Britt's social media activity helps Chris uncover clues about a mysterious person who had been hiding around the family home. Later, Britt becomes directly endangered when Rob kidnaps her, raising the personal stakes of the conflict and forcing Chris to fight not only for his own survival but also to protect his daughter. Her relationship with Chris also becomes part of the emotional resolution of the story. Kenneth Choi portrays Ray Vale, Chris's late police partner. Although Ray is no longer alive during the main events of Mercy, his death has a profound impact on Chris's psychological and emotional state. Chris continues to struggle with the consequences of Ray's murder and carries regret over how he handled the situation. The trauma contributes to Chris's relapse into alcoholism and damages his relationship with Nicole, making Ray's character important to understanding Chris's past. His guilt, and the personal issues he must confront during his trial. Rafi Gavran plays Holt Charles, one of Nicole's co-workers. Holt becomes significant when Chris investigates the circumstances surrounding Nicole's workplace and the reports of missing chemicals. Holt's financial problems and his connections to the missing chemicals make him one of the people Chris initially considers a potential suspect. His connection to Rob also helps Chris move closer to the truth about the larger conspiracy surrounding Nicole's death and the events that eventually threatened the Mercy Court. Jeff Pierre portrays Patrick Burke, a man who had been romantically involved with Nicole before her death. Patrick's relationship with Nicole initially appears to provide a possible explanation for tensions within Chris's marriage, but his testimony also reveals that Nicole had been dealing with serious difficulties at work and felt unable to communicate those problems to Chris. His character therefore becomes an important source of information as Chris attempts to reconstruct Nicole's final days and understand what she may have been involved in before her murder. Tom Resvin appears in the role of a governor, adding another figure connected to the broader political and institutional world surrounding the Mercy justice system. Although his role is smaller than those of the principal characters, the presence of a governor reinforces the film's larger setting, in which the Mercy program represents a major development in the administration of criminal justice and has consequences extending beyond Chris's individual case. Together, the cast of Mercy creates a network of characters connecting the film's central murder mystery with its larger themes of artificial intelligence, law enforcement, family, addiction, technological justice, corruption, and revenge. Chris Pratt and Rebecca Ferguson form the central dramatic pairing as Chris attempts to prove his innocence before the AI Judge Maddox, while Kali Reis provides the crucial law enforcement perspective outside the trial. Annabelle Wallis, Chris Sullivan, Kylie Rogers, Kenneth Choi, Rafi Gavran, Jeff Pierre, and Tom Resvin expand the story through their connections to Chris's family, past, workplace, investigation, and the wider Mercy justice system. Each character contributes to the film's increasingly complex mystery, helping Mercy develop from a straightforward murder accusation into a larger examination of how technology, human decisions, and personal motives can influence the meaning of justice. The production of Mercy, 2026, officially came together in early 2024 as a science fiction thriller project developed for Amazon MGM Studios. The film was first announced in January 2024, with Chris Pratt attached to headline the project. The announcement also established the film's primary creative team, with Timur Bekmambetov serving as director and Marco Van Baal writing the screenplay. The project was produced by Charles Roven, Robert Amidon, Timur Bekmambetov, and Majd Nassif, bringing together an experienced group of producers behind a story built around artificial intelligence, criminal justice, murder investigation, and a high-pressure fight for survival. From the beginning, the project was positioned as a technologically driven thriller, with Pratt taking on the central role and Bekmambetov's filmmaking background making him a natural choice to direct a story heavily dependent on futuristic technology and suspense. The casting process expanded significantly over the following months as the filmmakers assembled the ensemble surrounding Pratt's central character. In March 2024, Rebecca Ferguson and Annabelle Wallis joined the project. Although their specific roles were initially kept undisclosed, Ferguson would ultimately portray Judge Maddox, the artificial intelligence judge responsible for overseeing Chris Raven's case, while Wallis would play Nicole Raven, Chris's wife whose murder forms the central mystery of the story. Their additions gave the production two important performers capable of handling the film's contrasting dramatic elements. Ferguson's controlled and technologically oriented performance as an AI system and Wallis's role as the character whose death drives the protagonist's investigation. The ensemble continued to grow in April 2024, when Kali Reis, Rafi Gavran, Chris Sullivan, Kenneth Choi, and Kylie Rogers joined the cast. These additions expanded the film's character network around Chris Pratt's detective, allowing the story to move beyond its central courtroom premise and incorporate police investigation, family relationships, professional connections, and characters from Chris's past. Reis was eventually cast as Jacqueline Jack Diallo, Chris's police partner Gavran as Holt Charles, One of Nicole's co-workers, Sullivan as Robert Rob Nelson, Chris's Alcoholics Anonymous sponsor, and another person connected to Nicole Choi as Chris's late former partner Ray Vale, and Rogers as Chris's daughter Britch Raven. The casting process was completed in May 2024, when Jeff Pierre joined the production and was later revealed to be playing Patrick Burke, a man who had been seeing Nicole before her death. With the principal cast assembled, principal photography began on April 18, 2024, in Los Angeles, keeping the production geographically connected to the film's futuristic setting. The cinematography was handled by Khalid Matasp, who was responsible for establishing the visual identity of the movie and photographing its combination of dramatic performances, action sequences, futuristic environments, and technologically driven imagery. Shooting in Los Angeles was particularly fitting for a story set in a future version of the city, allowing the filmmakers to use real locations and environments as foundations for a world that could later be enhanced through production design and visual effects. The early days of filming were not completely without difficulties. On the fourth day of production, Chris Pratt suffered an ankle injury while filming. Pratt publicly acknowledged the injury by sharing an image of his swollen ankle on Instagram. Although the incident temporarily became a notable part of the production story, filming continued, and the production ultimately moved forward toward completion. The injury demonstrated some of the physical demands involved in making a thriller centered on a police detective, particularly a project that combines suspense, action, and physically demanding sequences. Despite the setback, production progressed relatively quickly. After beginning principal photography on April 18, the filmmakers completed filming and officially wrapped production on May 23, 2024. This meant that the principal photography phase lasted a little over a month, during which Bikram Bhatt and his filmmaking team captured the performances and material required to construct the film's futuristic murder mystery. Once filming concluded, the project could move into the extensive post-production stages required for a science fiction thriller, including editing, visual effects, sound work, and the creation of its technologically advanced environments and artificial intelligence elements. Overall, the production of Mercy, 2026, developed rapidly from its January 2024 announcement into principal photography only a few months later. The project began with Chris Pratt, Timur Bekmambetov, and Marco Van Bell at its core and gradually assembled a substantial ensemble led by Rebecca Ferguson, Annabelle Wallis, Kali Race, Rafi Gavrin, Chris Sullivan, Kenneth Choi, Kylie Rogers, and Jeff Pierre. Filmed primarily in Los Angeles under cinematographer Khalid Matasp, the production combined a relatively compact shooting schedule with the demanding requirements of a futuristic thriller. From the initial announcement and casting process to Pratt's on-set injury and the eventual May 23 wrap, the production established the foundation for a film centered on artificial intelligence, law enforcement, murder investigation, and a futuristic justice system where technology determines the fate of its defendants. Mercy, 2026, entered theaters in the United States and Canada on January 23, 2026. And ultimately generated a worldwide box office total of approximately $54.3 million. By March 1, 2026, the film had earned approximately $24.4 million from the United States and Canadian markets, while international territories contributed a further $29.9 million, bringing its worldwide theatrical gross to $54.3 million. The international market therefore accounted for a significant portion of the movie's overall theatrical revenue, although the worldwide performance remained below the film's reported $60 million production budget. In the domestic market, Mercy opened with approximately $12.6 million during its opening weekend. This performance was notable because it allowed the film to become the first movie to knock Avatar: Fire and Ash from the top position at the North American box office after that film had dominated the market for 5 consecutive weeks. However, Mercy's opening was affected by challenging weather conditions across North America. A major January 2026 winter storm caused significant disruption to moviegoing, with approximately 400 theaters temporarily closed. The closures reduced the number of available screens and potentially limited the film's opening weekend attendance, particularly in regions affected by severe weather. As a result, the film's initial box office performance occurred under unusually difficult circumstances rather than in a completely normal theatrical environment. Despite becoming the new #1 film in North America during its opening weekend, Mercy did not ultimately translate the debut into a worldwide theatrical gross large enough to exceed its reported production cost. With approximately $54.3 million worldwide against a $60 million budget, the movie finished its reported theatrical run below its production budget before accounting for marketing, distribution, theater revenue splits, and other expenses. Its financial performance therefore placed it in a challenging commercial position, particularly considering that a film's production budget does not represent the complete cost of bringing a major theatrical release to audiences. Critical response. The critical response to Mercy was predominantly negative, with reviewers frequently criticizing its screenplay, execution, thematic depth, and reliance on familiar science fiction and screen-based thriller conventions. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film received a 24% positive score from 181 critics, with an average rating of 4.3 out of 10. The site's critical consensus characterized the film as an overly restrictive and tedious techno-thriller, arguing that the central concept and its two leading performers were constrained by the movie's presentation. The result indicated that a substantial majority of professional critics found the film unsuccessful in translating its potentially intriguing premise into a satisfying cinematic experience. The response was similarly unfavorable on Metacritic, which uses a weighted scoring system to provide an overall numerical assessment of critical reception. Mercy received a score of 34 out of 100 based on 35 critics, placing the movie within Metacritic's generally unfavorable category. The site's unweighted breakdown showed 4 positive reviews, representing 11%, 16 mixed reviews, representing 46%, and 15 negative reviews, representing 43%. This distribution demonstrates that while a small number of critics responded positively, the majority were either mixed or negative toward the film. Audience reaction was somewhat more forgiving but still far from enthusiastic. Moviegoers surveyed by CinemaScore awarded the film an average grade of BA on the traditional A+ to F scale. Several critics focused specifically on the film's similarities to earlier science fiction and dystopian thrillers. Clarice Lowry of The Independent awarded Mercy 1 out of 5 stars and criticized the movie for drawing heavily from the mood and visual language of earlier Hollywood stories about technologically controlled societies, including Minority Report, RoboCop, and Blade Runner. Her criticism suggested that the film's futuristic world did not sufficiently distinguish itself from the dystopian ideas that audiences had already seen in previous science fiction productions. Rather than presenting a fresh examination of these concepts, the film was viewed as adopting familiar conventions without developing them into something substantially new. Radiant Simon Pillai of the Globe and Mail similarly acknowledged that the premise itself was intriguing but argued that the execution lacked emotional or creative vitality. His comparison described Mercy as resembling an artificially generated combination of Minority Report and Speed, particularly because of its technological premise, constant time pressure, and screen-based storytelling. The comparison reflected a recurring criticism among reviewers. The basic idea of an accused detective using a technologically controlled justice system to prove his innocence had potential, but critics felt the finished movie did not fully capitalize on that potential. Peter Howell of the Toronto Star was even more severe in his assessment, awarding the film 0 out of 4 stars. He criticized what he considered to be weak writing and chaotic direction and argued that the movie lacked both a clear artistic purpose and entertainment value. His review particularly objected to the film's visual and narrative presentation, suggesting that its extensive use of surveillance-style imagery did not compensate for weaknesses in its underlying storytelling. At the Straits Times, critic Wang Yiling gave Mercy 2 out of 5 stars. The review acknowledged that the film was visually dynamic but argued that its futuristic setting represented an opportunity that the movie did not fully explore. In particular, the critic felt that Mercy did not seriously engage with the ethical implications of its central ideas, including artificial intelligence dependence, privacy invasion, and government or state control. This criticism was important because these themes are at the center of the film's premise. A society has given an artificial intelligence system extraordinary authority over criminal justice, yet the movie's exploration of the consequences of that system was viewed by some critics as insufficiently developed. Not all reviews were entirely negative. James Mottram of the South China Morning Post gave the film 3 out of 5 stars and recognized its ability to create tension through its depiction of a technologically saturated near future. He particularly praised the film's depiction of a world in which drones, police body cameras, mobile phones, and doorbell cameras constantly record people's movements. This aspect of the movie was considered effective because it creates an unsettling atmosphere in which privacy is almost non-existent and virtually every action can potentially become evidence. For Mottram, the film worked best when it presented this technology-driven environment as something disturbingly close to the world audiences already inhabit. Kyle Logan of the Chicago Reader offered a more conditional assessment. He argued that Mercy could be particularly appealing to viewers already interested in the screen-life filmmaking format, in which stories are presented substantially through computer screens, surveillance feeds, video calls, social media, and other digital interfaces. For audiences fascinated by this style, Logan suggested that the film could be an interesting formal experiment. However, for viewers less interested in screen-life storytelling, he considered the movie capable of becoming either a conventional thriller with enough visual style to remain engaging or an overwhelming and frustrating viewing experience. Comparisons with other films. A major part of the critical discussions surrounding Mercy involved comparisons with earlier films that used similar concepts involving technology, wrongful accusations, surveillance, and futuristic justice. The most frequent comparison was Minority Report, Steven Spielberg's 2002 science fiction thriller about a future police system capable of predicting crimes before they occur. Both films explore societies in which technology has been given extraordinary authority over criminal justice, and both question whether technologically assisted systems can truly deliver perfect justice. Critics also compared Mercy to The Fugitive, particularly because both stories involve protagonists who become connected to a mysterious murder and must investigate the circumstances surrounding the crime while attempting to establish their innocence. The movie's ideas about technological control and manipulated justice also prompted comparisons with RoboCop and its 2014 remake. These comparisons stem from the film's shared interest in institutions, technology, law enforcement, and situations in which the truth surrounding a person's apparent death or downfall has been manipulated by people within a powerful system. In addition, Mercy was naturally compared with director Timur Bekmambetov's earlier screen-life thriller Searching, which similarly uses digital technology, social media, and online information as essential components of its mystery. However, where Searching centers heavily on a search for a missing daughter and the discovery of falsified information, Mercy expands the screen-life approach into a futuristic criminal justice environment. The film's connection to these earlier works became one of the most frequently discussed aspects of its critical reception. Critics generally recognized that Mercy had a potentially compelling combination of artificial intelligence, surveillance, wrongful accusation, and time-limited survival, but several argued that these elements had already been explored more effectively elsewhere. Consequently, the movie was sometimes viewed less as a groundbreaking new science fiction thriller and more as a combination of familiar ideas from established films. American critic Bob Montello summarized this criticism by describing the film as feeling derivative and comparing its overall effect to cinematic junk food. His assessment specifically characterized Mercy as resembling a Minority Report imitation rather than a work that successfully establishes its own distinctive identity. The comparison was particularly pointed because Mercy and Minority Report both place advanced technology at the center of criminal justice while questioning whether systems designed to eliminate human uncertainty can actually create new forms of injustice. Overall reception taken together, the response to Mercy, 2026, was largely unfavorable among professional critics, although some reviewers recognized genuine strengths in its concept, visual presentation, and depiction of a surveillance-heavy near future. The movie's strongest point for many of its defenders was its central idea: a detective accused of murdering his wife must use the same artificial intelligence justice system he once trusted to prove that the system is wrong. The concept naturally creates suspense while providing opportunities to explore artificial intelligence, privacy, surveillance, state authority, and the reliability of automated decision-making. However, critics who disliked the film generally felt that its execution did not match the ambition of its premise. Common criticisms included a derivative story, underdeveloped ethical themes, clunky writing, restrictive screen life presentation, and an over-reliance on concepts associated with earlier science fiction thrillers. While the performances of Chris Pratt and Rebecca Ferguson were central to the movie, several critics felt that the unusual structure of the story limited what the two actors could accomplish dramatically. The result was a film that generated interest because of its premise but struggled to satisfy critics who expected a deeper or more original exploration of its ideas. Commercially, Mercy opened strongly enough to take the #1 position at the North American box office, but its overall $54.3 million worldwide gross remained below its reported $60 million production budget. Critically, its 24% Rotten Tomatoes score, 34 1/100ths Metacritic score, and Boss Cinema score demonstrated the significant gap between the film's intriguing high-concept premise and the response to its final execution. Ultimately, Mercy was recognized as a visually ambitious and technologically relevant thriller with a potentially fascinating premise, but the majority of critics concluded that it did not provide the originality, emotional depth, or thematic sophistication necessary to distinguish itself from the science fiction and screen life films that inspired comparisons. The animation of Raya and the Last Dragon was one of Disney Animation's most technically ambitious achievements. Approximately 800 artists and technicians contributed to the production using industry-leading software such as Autodesk Maya, Houdini, and Nuke. The filmmakers blended modern 3D computer animation with stylistic influences from traditional Asian shadow puppet storytelling, creating a visual style that felt both contemporary and timeless. Every costume was modeled using long, folded pieces of fabric rather than conventional clothing patterns, allowing garments to move naturally and realistically during action scenes. The animation team also developed sophisticated lighting techniques to capture the extraordinary diversity of Kumandra's environments, from humid tropical forests and floating cities to frozen mountains and scorching deserts. They expanded Disney's crowd simulation technology to populate each kingdom with culturally distinct citizens while maintaining incredible levels of detail and realism throughout the film. To further enhance realism, the filmmakers introduced advanced procedural animation systems that simulated massive schools of fish, crawling insects, dragon movement, and complex environmental interactions. Technologies such as position-based dynamics, PBD, void simulations, and distance integral algorithms allowed dragons, water, vegetation, and other natural elements to behave convincingly throughout the film. The cinematography was equally sophisticated, using changing camera lenses, lighting styles, and color palettes to visually reflect Raya's emotional transformation. During moments of distrust, scenes were filmed with wider lenses, darker lighting, and colder colors, while moments of hope and emotional connection employed warmer lighting, softer focus, and richer color palettes. One particularly impressive visual transition occurs when Raya is swept down the Dragon River and emerges 6 years later in the arid deserts of Tale, achieved through carefully designed light distortion and mirage effects that emphasize the dramatic transformation of Kumandra and Raya herself. The music of Raya and the Last Dragon plays a vital role in shaping the film's emotional depth, adventurous spirit, and cultural authenticity. The film's original musical score was composed by acclaimed Academy Award-nominated composer James Newton Howard, marking his first collaboration with Walt Disney Animation Studios. Renowned for his work on films such as The Hunger Games, Fantastic Beasts, Maleficent, and King Kong, Howard crafted a sweeping orchestral soundtrack that perfectly complements the film's epic fantasy setting while emphasizing its central themes of trust, hope, family, sacrifice, and unity. Throughout the score, Howard blended powerful orchestral arrangements with musical influences inspired by the rich traditions of Southeast Asia, creating a distinctive soundscape that enhances every stage of Rhea's emotional and physical journey across the divided land of Kumandra, from exhilarating action sequences and breathtaking dragon encounters to heartfelt emotional moments between Rhea, Sisu, and their companions. The score adds depth and emotional resonance to the film's storytelling. The official soundtrack album featuring James Newton Howard's original score was released on February 26, 2021, 1 week before the film's theatrical premiere, allowing audiences to experience the film's musical world even before its release. In addition to the orchestral score, the film features the original end credits song Lead the Way, which was written and performed by Grammy-nominated singer, songwriter, and R&B artist Jen A. Copyright Tycho, serving as the emotional conclusion to the film. The song reflects the story's powerful messages about courage, healing, forgiveness, and the importance of trusting one another despite past hardships. With its heartfelt lyrics and uplifting melody, Lead the Way captures Rhea's transformative journey and reinforces the film's optimistic message that unity and compassion can overcome even the greatest divisions. Jen A. Copyright Tycho's soulful vocal performance adds warmth and emotional depth to the closing moments of the film, making the song one of the soundtrack's standout pieces. To further celebrate the film's connection with Southeast Asian audiences, Disney also released localized versions of Lead the Way in several regional languages. Among the most notable was Gabe, meaning guide, the Filipino language adaptation of the song performed by acclaimed Filipino singer KZ Tandingan, released in March 2021 as part of the soundtrack for the film's Filipino dub. Gabe became Disney's first ever Filipino-language original song for one of its animated feature films. The release marked a significant milestone for Disney's localization efforts and demonstrated the studio's commitment to celebrating regional cultures and supporting local artistic talent. According to Ali Benedicto, studio marketing head of Disney Philippines, the inclusion of Gabe reflected Disney's dedication to collaborating with Filipino creatives while making the film more meaningful and relatable for local audiences. KZ Tandingan's powerful and emotionally expressive performance was widely praised, further strengthening the film's cultural connection with viewers in the Philippines and reinforcing Disney's broader mission of honoring the diverse cultures that inspired Raya and the Last Dragon. Disney launched an extensive global marketing campaign for Raya and the Last Dragon in the months leading up to its release, highlighting the film's breathtaking animation, action-packed adventure, and unique Southeast Asian-inspired setting. The studio released the film's first full trailer on January 26, 2021, giving audiences their first in-depth look at the mythical world of Kumandra, its stunning landscapes, the fierce warrior Princess Raya, and the humorous yet powerful Last Dragon, Sisu. The trailer generated widespread excitement across social media and quickly became one of Disney's most talked-about promotional releases. However, it also sparked discussions regarding cultural representation. While many viewers praised Disney for creating an original fantasy inspired by Southeast Asian history, mythology, and traditions, some audiences and cultural commentators expressed concerns that the film's predominantly East Asian voice cast did not fully reflect the diverse ethnic backgrounds of Southeast Asia. These discussions encouraged broader conversations about authentic representation in animated films and prompted Disney to further emphasize the extensive cultural research, consultation, and collaboration that had shaped the production of the movie. As part of its worldwide promotional campaign, Disney partnered with several internationally recognized brands to introduce a wide range of merchandise inspired by the film. Major collaborations included McDonald's, which offered themed Happy Meal toys featuring Raya, Sisu, Tuk Tuk, and other beloved characters, allowing younger audiences to engage with the film beyond the cinema. Disney also worked with LG Electronics and Procter & Gamble on promotional campaigns, exclusive advertisements, and branded merchandise that helped expand the film's global visibility. In addition to these international partnerships, Disney placed significant emphasis on celebrating the Southeast Asian cultures that inspired Kumandra by collaborating with regional companies. The studio partnered with Omsum, a food brand specializing in Southeast Asian cuisine, and Sanzo, a beverage company known for producing sparkling water flavored with authentic Asian fruits. These collaborations were designed to honor the cultural heritage that influenced the film while introducing global audiences to authentic Southeast Asian products and businesses. Disney also actively supported emerging local entrepreneurs, artists, and advertisers throughout Southeast Asia, reinforcing its commitment to cultural appreciation and representation. When selecting promotional partners, Disney carefully considered the film's target audience, family-oriented appeal, and the evolving entertainment landscape as movie theaters gradually reopened during the COVID-19 pandemic. Originally, Raya and the Last Dragon was scheduled to be released in theaters on November 25, 2020, during the Thanksgiving holiday season. However, due to the global disruption caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, Disney postponed the film's release multiple times as theaters around the world faced closures and capacity restrictions. The release was initially moved to March 12, 2021, partly to avoid direct competition with DreamWorks Animation's The Croods: A New Age, before Disney ultimately advanced the release date by 1 week. The film finally premiered in the United States on March 5, 2021. Becoming one of Disney's major hybrid releases during the pandemic era. It was released simultaneously in theaters and on the streaming service Disney Plus through the Premier Access program, allowing subscribers to watch the film at home by paying an additional premium fee while it was still showing in cinemas. This release strategy reflected Disney's efforts to accommodate both audiences who wished to return to theaters and those who preferred to watch safely from home. The film remained available through Premier Access until June 4, 2021, after which it became available to all Disney Plus subscribers at no additional cost. The theatrical version of the film was accompanied by Disney's original animated short Us Again, giving audiences an additional heartfelt story before the feature presentation. Following its successful theatrical and streaming debut, Walt Disney Studios Home Entertainment released Raya and the Last Dragon for digital purchase on April 2, 2021, allowing viewers to own the film across major digital platforms. The home media rollout continued with the release of Ultra HD Blu-ray, and DVD editions on May 18, 2021. The digital edition also included Disney's animated short Us Again, providing fans with additional family entertainment. The physical home media releases featured an extensive collection of bonus content that offered audiences an in-depth look at the making of the film. Special features included an introduction to Us Again, a behind-the-scenes featurette exploring the creation of the animated short, as well as Taste of Raya, a virtual culinary experience showcasing the diverse Southeast Asian dishes and flavors that inspired the world of Kumandra. Another documentary, Raya, Bringing It Home, highlighted how Disney's artists, animators, and filmmakers completed the production while working remotely from their homes during the COVID-19 pandemic. Additional featurettes explored the martial arts styles, combat techniques, and traditional weapons that influenced the film's action sequences, while We Are Kumandra examined the extensive cultural research conducted with the Southeast Asia Story Trust and the real-world traditions that shaped the fictional kingdom. The Blu-ray also included entertaining outtakes from the voice cast, hidden Easter eggs, fascinating production facts, storyboard presentations by co-director John Repa, and several deleted scenes that provided fans with a deeper appreciation of the creative process behind one of Walt Disney Animation Studios' most ambitious original films. Despite being released during one of the most challenging periods in modern cinema due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Raya and the Last Dragon delivered a respectable commercial performance both in theaters and on streaming platforms. The film ultimately grossed approximately $130.4 million worldwide, including $54.7 million in the United States and Canada and $75.7 million from international markets. Although these figures were lower than those of many previous Walt Disney Animation Studios releases because of widespread theater closures, reduced seating capacities, and the simultaneous Disney Plus Premier Access release, The film was still regarded as one of Disney's most successful hybrid releases during the pandemic era. Its theatrical earnings were further complemented by impressive streaming numbers, demonstrating the growing importance of digital distribution in the changing entertainment industry. The film opened in 2,045 theaters across the United States and Canada on March 5, 2021. Earning approximately $2.5 million on its first day before finishing its opening weekend with $8.5 million, making it the #1 film at the North American box office. However, its debut was affected by several unusual circumstances. Major theater chains including CinePeak and Harkins in the United States, as well as Cineplex in Canada, initially declined to screen the film because they disagreed with Disney's rental terms and revenue-sharing agreements. Combined with the simultaneous Disney Plus Premier Access release, this limited the film's theatrical potential during its opening weekend. As a result, Raya and the Last Dragon opened below the domestic debut figures of other recent family-oriented releases such as The Croods, A New Age, 2020, and Tom Jerry, 2021. Nevertheless, the film displayed remarkable staying power over the following weeks. During its second weekend, it earned approximately $5.5 million, followed by $5.2 million during its third weekend, successfully maintaining the #1 position at the domestic box office. As positive word of mouth continued to spread, its domestic earnings steadily increased, eventually matching and later surpassing the North American box office performance of Tom Jerry, proving its strong audience appeal despite the difficult market conditions. Internationally, Raya and the Last Dragon also performed solidly across numerous territories. The film debuted in 32 overseas markets, generating approximately $26.2 million during its opening weekend. China emerged as the film's strongest international market with an opening of around $8.6 million. While Russia contributed approximately $2.8 million. In subsequent weekends, the film continued attracting audiences worldwide, earning approximately $11.5 million during its second weekend and an additional $8 million in its third weekend across 29 international markets. Although pandemic-related restrictions continued to affect cinema attendance in many countries, the film maintained a consistent international box office momentum and ultimately generated more than half of its worldwide earnings outside North America. While its theatrical performance was noteworthy, the film achieved even greater success through streaming. During its first 3 days of availability in the week beginning March 1, 2021, Raya and the Last Dragon accumulated approximately 355 million minutes viewed, making it the fourth most watched streaming film of the week according to Nielsen. Initially available exclusively through Disney Plus's Premier Access program for an additional purchase fee, the film experienced a dramatic surge in viewership after becoming available to all Disney Plus subscribers at no extra cost on June 4, 2021. During the week spanning May 31 to June 6, the film recorded approximately 1.1 billion viewing minutes, becoming the second most viewed streaming title during that period, behind only Netflix's hit series Lucifer. This represented a massive increase compared to its earlier weekly viewing figures of approximately 115 million minutes, while it remained behind the Premier Access paywall, highlighting the tremendous audience demand once the film became freely accessible to subscribers. The film's streaming success continued throughout the remainder of the year. According to Nielsen and Deadline Hollywood's official ranking of the most watched streaming titles of 2021, released in January 2022, Raya and the Last Dragon became the third most streamed film of the entire year, accumulating an extraordinary 8.34 billion viewing minutes. It finished behind Pixar's Luca, which topped the list with 10.5 billion minutes viewed, and Disney's Moana, which remained immensely popular with 8.9 billion minutes watched. The film's widespread popularity on streaming platforms further demonstrated its long-lasting appeal among families and Disney audiences worldwide. However, its popularity also made it a target for digital piracy. In January 2022, internet technology company Akamai reported that Raya and the Last Dragon ranked as the 9th most pirated film of 2021. reflecting both its immense global demand and the challenges studios faced in protecting digital releases during the streaming era. Raya and the Last Dragon received overwhelmingly positive reviews from critics, with particular praise directed toward its breathtaking animation, emotional storytelling, voice performances, action sequences, musical score, and celebration of Southeast Asian-inspired cultures. On the review aggregation website Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds an impressive 93% approval rating based on 303 professional reviews. The site's critical consensus describes the film as another beautifully animated and expertly voiced addition to Disney's legendary collection of animated classics, applauding its continued efforts toward greater cultural representation while proving that the studio's classic storytelling formula remains as effective as ever. On Metacritic, which calculates a weighted average based on professional reviews, the film received a score of 74 out of 100 from 48 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. Audience reception was equally enthusiastic. Moviegoers surveyed by CinemaScore awarded the film a prestigious A grade on its traditional A+ to F scale, reflecting exceptionally positive audience satisfaction. Meanwhile, research firm PostTrack reported that 92% of viewers gave the film a positive overall rating, while 78% stated they would actively recommend it to friends and family. These audience scores demonstrated the film's strong emotional impact and broad appeal across viewers of all ages. Many prominent critics praised the film for its stunning visual artistry and meaningful themes. Publications such as The Atlantic and The New York Observer highlighted the breathtaking animation, imaginative world-building, and powerful exploration of trust, forgiveness, and unity. Reviewers from the San Francisco Chronicle commended the film for successfully balancing heartfelt emotional storytelling, light-hearted humor, spectacular action, and thoughtful social themes within a richly detailed fantasy setting. Critics from Rolling Stone and RogerEbert.com celebrated the film's seamless blend of Southeast Asian mythology with classic Disney storytelling, describing it as visually magnificent, emotionally engaging, and reminiscent of the studio's finest animated productions. Similarly, Vanity Fair and Vulture praised the film's emotionally resonant narrative, compelling character relationships, and extraordinary animation quality, while numerous reviewers also applauded Disney's diverse voice cast and memorable supporting characters for bringing the world of Kumandra vividly to life. Although the overall critical response was highly favorable, some reviewers expressed reservations about certain aspects of the film. Several critics believed the story attempted to cover too many ideas within its relatively short runtime, resulting in pacing issues and world-building that occasionally felt underdeveloped. Others argued that while the film drew inspiration from numerous Southeast Asian cultures, it sometimes blended these diverse traditions into a generalized fantasy world rather than representing specific cultural identities in greater depth. The Atlantic suggested that Raya herself occasionally lacked cultural specificity, arguing that she sometimes felt more like an outsider exploring Southeast Asia than a character deeply rooted in its traditions. The New York Times similarly questioned whether Disney's approach fully captured the complexities of authentic cultural representation while balancing its global commercial ambitions. Variety criticized the execution of the narrative, stating that although the world of Kumandra was visually spectacular, its storytelling and world-building occasionally lacked the smooth narrative flow expected from Disney's strongest animated features. Reviewers from the Irish Times and Vox also cited concerns regarding the film's ambitious central premise and its broad approach to representing Southeast Asian cultures. Nevertheless, despite these criticisms, the overwhelming majority of critics and audiences regarded Raya and the Last Dragon as one of Walt Disney Animation Studios' finest modern original films, praising its emotional storytelling, spectacular animation, memorable characters, and timeless message that trust and unity have the power to overcome even the deepest divisions. In this article, follow your favorite stocks, create free account. Disney has done it again. On Monday, reviews for the studio's latest animated feature Raya and the Last Dragon began to trickle in, signaling that the House of Mouse has yet another hit on its hands. So far, the film, which is due to hit theaters and Disney Plus Premier Access on Friday, holds a 96% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes from 89 reviews. Raya and the Last Dragon takes place in Kumandra, a place where humans and dragons once lived together in harmony. However, when sinister monsters known as the Drun threaten the land, the dragons sacrifice themselves, channeling their powers into a gemstone, to save humanity. 500 years later, Kumandra is splintered into 5 provinces: a heart, fang, spine, tail and talon. When one of the 5 tries to steal the gemstone, it shatters, weakening its powers and bringing back the Drun. In the process, Raya's father Benja, chief of the Heartland, is turned to stone. This sends Raya, Kelly Marie Tran, on a quest to summon the spirit of Sisu, Aquafina, the last dragon, and reunite the pieces of the gemstone to save Kumandra and her father. Throughout the film, Raya and Sisu put together a ragtag crew that includes an orphan who runs a floating restaurant, a con artist baby, a team of monkey henchmen, and the last soldier standing from the Spine Province. Raya's quest also puts her directly in the path of Namari, Gemma-chan, the Fang princess who was directly responsible for breaking the gem and turning Raya's father into stone. Critics widely praised Disney's latest animated feature, which comes from its Disney Animation division, a sister studio to Pixar. Many pointed to the film's achievements in visual effects, particularly when it comes to its depiction of water and in its fast-paced action sequences. Raya and the Last Dragon is well worth the price of admission, wrote Brandon Katz in his review of the film for Observer, noting that those that were disappointed after spending $30 to watch Mulan will be pleased with the quality of the film. The film is nothing short of a joyous experience that champions a hopeful optimism in humanity's ability to trust one another despite ample evidence to the contrary, Katz wrote. The relevant themes combine with slick animation and surprisingly excellent martial arts-based action to deliver the best animated Disney film since Moana. Here's what critics thought of Raya and the Last Dragon ahead of its debut on Friday. Alonso Duralda, The Wrap. Alonso Duralda's review of Raya and the Last Dragon commended the film for its dynamic female leads and complex character-driven storytelling. In the past, animated features about princesses relied heavily on romantic storylines and musical interludes. There's neither a love story nor musical numbers here, and neither are missed. Duralda writes, "This is a film brimming over with humor and adventure, breathtaking fight choreography and eye-popping fantasy." Raya, voiced by Kelly Marie Chan, faces off against Namari, voiced by Gemma Chan, in Disney's Raya and the Last Dragon. Disney he refers to Raya and Namari, rival princesses, as more akin to Xena than Sleeping Beauty. That Disney has gotten to a place where it can accommodate complex storytelling, characters of color. The voice cast also includes Sandra Oh, Sung Kang and Patty Harrison, and women with strength and agency makes Raya and the Last Dragon both a groundbreaker for one of Hollywood's most venerable animation studios and, one hopes, a harbinger of more challenging entertainments in the years to come, he said. Read the full review from The Wrap. Angie Han, Mashable. Angie Han, from Mashable, too, pointed out that Raya isn't a typical Disney princess of a bygone era. Raya sits comfortably alongside other recent Disney princesses: Mona, Elsa and Anna, Vanellope von Schweetze, who veered away from classic fairy tale tropes in search of more expansive adventures on the horizon. She wrote in her review of the film, "Disney strikes a balance between cute comedy and sincere drama," Han says, blending high-speed action sequences with beautiful vistas and endearing characters. Alan Tudyk lends his voice to Tuk Tuk in Disney's Raya and the Last Dragon. It's easy enough to guess from the get-go where this is all headed, and in case you're still struggling to keep up, Raya has a habit of repeating pertinent plot points or explaining scenes we just saw, she wrote. Fortunately, the journey isn't all that much less enjoyable for being somewhat predictable. If anything, there's satisfaction in its tidiness, like clicking together the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. Read the full review from Mashable. Brandon Katz, Observer. Katz's review praised the CG animation created for the feature, the varying designs, color schemes, and even architecture of each culture, specifically tailored to each tribe down to the hairstyle, is a sight to behold. He wrote, "It's nothing short of amazing that a majority of the production work was done from home in the pandemic." Katz also pointed out that much of the voice acting was also captured away from the office. In fact, Raya and the Last Dragon is the first Walt Disney Animation Studios film to be produced primarily at home. Kelly Marie Tran and Awkwafina star in Disney's Raya and the Last Dragon. Disney working from home doesn't appear to have hindered Disney's animation team. Katz assures viewers that Raya is worth the price of admission or the price of Disney's Premier Access. Disney Plus subscribers who may or may not feel burned after shelling out $30 for Mulan need not worry, he wrote. Raya and the Last Dragon is one purchase you won't regret. Read the full review from Observer. Scott Mendelson. Forbes. Scott Mendelson was more critical of Disney's newest animated film. In his review for Forbes, Mendelson noted that Raya is a visual delight but formulaic to a fault. Their 59th feature-length animated film plays like a loose remake of Mona, with themes and character arcs gently borrowed from the likes of Frozen and Zootopia, including a there-are-no-villains mentality that frankly plays downright insidious and detrimental in our current hellscape, he wrote. Mendelson noted that the journey to reunite the broken pieces of the magical gemstone was also far too easy. The notion that nobody trusts each other is somewhat countered by how reasonable most friends and foes turn out to be in this hero's journey, he wrote. Awkwafina and Kelly Marie Tran lend their voices to Sisu and Raya in Disney's Raya and the Last Dragon. He also said that Raya is set up to provide future sequel films or even episodic content for Disney's streaming service. Kids will enjoy this one, Mendelson wrote. My 9-year-old enjoyed himself while my 13-year-old echoed my moderate nitpicks and complaints. He pointed out that his indifference for the film may have come from watching Raya at home instead of in a theater. Had I seen this in a theater as intended, I may have been slightly more forgiving of the adherence to no harm, no foul franchise-friendly formula, Mendelson wrote. Raya is the by default event movie of the moment and expected to be all things to all demographics. Read the full review from Forbes. Disclosure: Comcast is the parent company of Universal and CNBC. Universal own Rotten Tomatoes. Choose CNBC as your preferred source on Google and never miss a moment from the most trusted name in business news. Disney's latest animated film has action, heart, and introduces an exciting new hero. Raya and the Last Dragon debuts on Disney Plus with Premier Access in most Disney Plus markets, at the same time as it is released in theaters on March 5, where recent Disney princess films reminded young girls they too could be heroes. Raya and the Last Dragon teaches its viewers about the perils of going at it alone. It's a smart next evolution of the action princess coming-of-age story, with a clear through line to princess predecessors in Frozen and Mona. Like Mona, Raya strikes out into the world on a classic hero's journey. Like Elsa, Raya is emotionally closed off at the start of the film. Unlike these other heroines, Raya doesn't lack self-confidence or understanding of her abilities. She's a skilled fighter, a quality she does not question, and it's about time. Raya and the Last Dragon, Disney's first film starring a Southeast Asian princess, opens with its own lore. The once prosperous land of Kumendra used to be brimming with dragons, creatures whose existence was tied to water and life itself. When the villainous Droon attacked an enemy capable of turning all to stone, dragons fought to defend themselves and humans alike. The last living dragons pulled their power into the dragon gem, which revived the humans. But the dragons remained frozen in time, with the exception of Sisu, the last living dragon. Raya's epic quest kicks off when the dragon gem shatters, unleashing the Droon back into the world. The film advances the groundwork laid by Frozen and Mona, which ushered in a modern era of princesses that weren't romance-focused, but rather independent and intent on saving their people and their world. Where Elsa and Mona both spent their films growing into power, individuality, and freedom, each with their respective earworm power ballads, Raya's hero's journey is marked by moments where she is challenged to make new friends, and rely on them to fight for her cause. By the end of the film, I had fallen in love with the character Raya had become and was fully invested in the friends she had made. Raya and the Last Dragon's framing around themes of trust breathes new life into the Disney animated action-adventure format. The waypoints along Raya's hero's journey each challenge her to be vulnerable with others, in addition to posing physical challenges, like swinging between ravines, giving the supporting cast real opportunities to shine, and Raya plenty of opportunities to outwit her opponents. As Raya and Dragon Sisu barrel through the regions of Kumendra, tail, talon, spine, fang, and heart, their relationship deepens. This is also true of Rhea's confrontations with childhood friend-turned-villain Namari, who is also a princess. Each fight reveals something new about their rocky past, and how they might make amends. Scrapping romance gives Rhea and the Last Dragon more space to give platonic relationships their due. Rhea and the Last Dragon is also one of Disney's best films about grief. Disney's princess films have always been about grief, as practically all of the princesses have lost a family member, or multiple, by the start of their movies. In prior films, these deaths mostly act as backstory and character motivation. By contrast, every single significant character in Rhea and the Last Dragon has experienced devastating personal loss, is motivated by grief, and has spent a lot of time alone. Their decision to trust one another to form a chosen family feels much more meaningful with this weight. Disney's princesses have always had enormous sway in pop culture, particularly for American children. The toys, costumes, and music from any recent release can feel inescapable. Rhea and the Last Dragon will give Southeast Asian girls not one but two princesses, both of whom are amazing fighters, and both of whom learn valuable lessons about leaning on friends and family for help. Before this, young Asian American Disney fans had Mulan, the well-loved classic that Rhea and the Last Dragon effectively pays homage to without feeling recycled. Some parallels with Mulan are obvious: a young woman using her fighting skills on a quest to protect her father, and a dragon companion voiced by a comedian. Of course, Rhea and the Last Dragon is debuting to an audience with higher expectations around cultural representation than those who grew up with Mulan. At a moment where the number of Asian-centered films is steadily climbing, yet still limited, and where Southeast Asian actors are underrepresented in comparison to East Asian actors, this puts particular pressure on Disney's first Southeast Asian princess. Disney did a fair amount of research. Similar to Mona, Disney created what they call a story trust of artists, academics, and others, which they leaned on for issues of cultural accuracy. The team visited Southeast Asian countries, including Thailand, Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. Screenwriters Adele Lim and Keen Yen are both Southeast Asian, as is Kelly Marie Tran, who voices Rhea. But there's the fact that most of the other voice actors, a packed roster of talent that includes Gemma Chan, Daniel Dae Kim, Awkwafina, and Sandra Oh, are East Asian. And because Kumandra is a fantasy world drawing from a number of different countries in a larger region, it risks blurring cultural references to the point where they become unrecognizable or incoherent to the people who expected to identify with the movie. It's a fine line to tread, and part of a larger conversation about the extent to which films featuring unrepresented ethnic groups are asked to carry the burden of accurately portraying that group. The idea that any one film, even if it meets the highest standards of research in casting, could capture Southeast Asia already falls apart. There is no single identity, as Southeast Asians aren't a monolith, and like Mulan, this film mostly reads as distinctly American, with jokes about things like working on group projects at school that feel a bit out of place in a world that is supposedly fantastical. It's ultimately a film whose action and heart I really enjoyed, with a princess that I am genuinely excited about. It's also a film that I hope to see in theaters. Tail, talon, spine, fang, and heart are each vibrantly animated. The frightening drone evokes the bubbling threats of Miyazaki's Princess Mononoke, and fight scenes are particularly thrilling. The film's fight styles are based on Muay Thai and Pencaksilat, and grounded in real-world physics. When a character takes a punch, or when Rhea parries with her father's keris, it has a genuine weight that gives fights greater table stakes. Disney's first Southeast Asian princess would only look even more powerful on the big screen. Rhea and the Last Dragon is a beautifully animated, action-packed hero's journey, and a great next evolution of Disney's modern-day princess films. Where princesses like Mona and Elsa spent their films learning to trust in their powers, Disney's first Southeast Asian princess Rhea is already an excellent fighter, capable of besting even the strongest of warriors, including her nemesis and fellow princess Namari. This gives the film space to focus on themes of trust, and the importance of finding a support system of friends and family, as well as truly tackling concepts like grief at the thematic mainstays of Disney's princess films that haven't always been adequately explored. 3. Raya and the Last Dragon feels too rushed to qualify as a full saga, but is nonetheless memorable for spirit and character. Raya and the Last Dragon are manifestations of disharmony that can petrify living beings. After they invade Kumandra, the dragon guardians of the land exhausted their magic to imprison them, following which they were turned to stone themselves. 500 years later, Kumandra is divided into 5 antagonistic tribes, each named after a part of a dragon, with the tribe of Heart guarding the dragon gem, the last remaining source of dragon magic. A failed attempt by the Chief of Heart to unite the tribes then splits the gem and releases the Drun, to save her petrified father. Raya, that is, the daughter of the Chief of Heart, embarks on a long quest to reassemble the gem. After 6 years, she finally makes an important breakthrough. She locates Sisu, the legendary last dragon that supposedly created the mighty gem. Snappy review. Apart from the shorter runtime, which resulted in some parts of the adventure feeling too rushed, I have little to complain about Raya and the Last Dragon. It's very modern, and yet also faithful to the refined Disney formula. There are mentally and physically hardy heroines, and adorable mascots are in abundance. Of course, it's also all about a fantasy road trip, a quest across a land as varied as it is divided. Regarding the story, I feel it is politically laden. It is so obviously a scathing commentary on distrust between nations and how that generates a plague of woes for everyone. Being a Disney animated adventure, the resolution or advice given is naturally simplistic too, probably something real-life politicians would scoff at. It's not a huge flaw to me, though. Naive as it sounds, I do believe the resolution of many complex issues begins with goodwill. Perhaps not in the trusting way Goofy Sisu does it with, but well, it's always a positive first step. Speaking of Sisu, Awkwafina delivered such a wonderfully hyper voiceover, a performance that's suitably moronic or amazingly insightful at different moments. The land-saving heroines of Raya and Namari aren't on my list of favorite kick-ass Disney princesses, yet, but with another viewing, who knows? They just might be. They probably would be. Check out my other snappy movie reviews. For Raya and the Last Dragon is a well-crafted Disney animated film that should entertain the entire family. I watched it with my wife, 7-year-old daughter, and in-laws, and everyone had a blast, especially my child, who sat enthralled throughout. I knew she really liked it when she told me she wanted to own it and started to play the soundtrack in her room shortly after watching the films. The film is full of wonderful animation and visuals, an engaging story, great action, well-rounded characters, and is enjoyable and executed well from start to finish. It is a gem of a film. Raya and the Last Dragon tells the story of the mystical land of Kumandra, which was once terrorized by the Drun, evil spirits that attack and petrify the land's people as things look pretty bleak. But there are dragons that come to the rescue. As her dragon brothers and sisters are being petrified, Sisu, the last dragon, thanks to a magic gem, banishes the Drun, reviving Kumandra's people but not the dragons, as she goes missing. Instead of being grateful for the dragon saving them at great cost, the people of the land become divided and are separated into 5 tribes, based on their placement along a giant, dragon-shaped river. Fang, heart, spine, talon, and tail. A long time passes, 500 years to be exact, when our hero Raya comes into the tale. Her father is Benja, the chief of the Heart tribe which protects the gem. Chief Benka believes with all his heart that the tribes can be united once again. He invites the leaders of all 5 tribes for a feast. During the feast, Raya befriends the daughter of Chief Vran of the Fang tribe, Namari, thinking she's made a new friend, and shows her the location of the gem. Namari betrays Raya, as she and her mother want the gem for their own people. Well, a scuffle takes place and the gem is destroyed, which reawakens the Drun, who start petrifying people, including Benka. 6 years later, we discover that Raya has been in a desperate search on the potential location of where Sisu might be lying dormant. So, Raya finds the location using a stolen map belonging to the Fang tribe and summons Sisu, who she believes can bring things back to order and restore the people that have been petrified, including her father. Sisu, who is a funny and odd dragon and not at all what Raya expects, tells her that she did not create the orb but only used it on behalf of her siblings and can gain her siblings' powers when she touches its pieces. They go about trying to recover the missing orb pieces pursued by Namari and her tribesmen. Along the way, they are befriended by a variety of colorful characters, including a toddler con artist and her 3 monkey-like friends, a young restaurateur Baun, who lost his family to the Drun, and Tong, a fearsome warrior, who is actually a softie with a sad backstory. Read more of Bill Choi's reviews. More, TV review, Shadow and Bone, a well-crafted show that is worth watching. More, movie review, I had no idea The Mitchells vs. the Machines would be so good. The story is well crafted and engaging. I like the world that is created and how culturally distinct it all is, using different Asian cultures, mainly Southeast Asian, to form a unique and fully formed world. The voice cast is top-notch. Kelly Marie Tran makes a wonderful Rhea and is fierce, compassionate, and brave heroine who is relatable. Awkwafina is fun and witty as Sisu and has some of the film's best lines and had be laughing out loud throughout. She brings wonderfully odd energy and quirkiness to the part. Gemma Chan is great as Namari, who is not a conventional villain but is much more complex and three-dimensional. All in all, Raya and the Last Dragon is a terrific film that is without a doubt worth watching. I will most certainly be watching it again. Knowing my daughter, we will be watching it a lot over the summer. Honestly, some of the other films she likes I get a bit tired of watching it again and again. This one, on the other hand, I am more than fine with repeated viewings. It's certainly a film I think will be right up there with other Disney animated classics. It's that good. Grade A+. Raya and the Last Dragon is now streaming on Disney+. Rated PG for some violence, action and thematic elements. Running time, 1 hour and 47 minutes. Raya and the Last Dragon is now streaming on Disney+. Rated PG for some violence, action and thematic elements. Running time, 1 hour and 47 minutes. 5. Raya and the Last Dragon has almost everything that you'd expect from a traditional Disney film. Some fans will feel let down by its notable lack of musical numbers and laughs per minute humor, but its thought-provoking plot and celebration of Southeast Asian culture offers something unique to Disney's catalog. Plus animation is on point, plus emotional plot tugs at the heartstrings, plus cast works well together. Humor is hit and miss. Some action sequences are all too brief. Lack of traditional songs will disappoint some fans. Raya and the Last Dragon represents a significant milestone for Walt Disney Animation Studios. With the COVID-19 pandemic impacting the film industry, Disney's latest animated feature is the first to be completed remotely, with over 900 employees animating, problem-solving, and conducting other vital work from home. It's a testament to the team's work, then, that this sudden change in working circumstances doesn't really show. Raya and the Last Dragon bears the hallmarks you would expect from a Disney production, and its celebration of Southeast Asian culture, albeit set within a dark story by their standards, is another step on the company's redemptive journey towards greater representation within its movies. Raya and the Last Dragon takes place 500 years after a potentially world-ending event. Historically, humans lived peacefully alongside dragons, but the emergence of the Drun, a mindless plague born of darkness, threatened to destroy life as they knew it. As the dragons fought bravely to protect humanity, the fabled Sisu, Awkwafina, concentrated her magic into the dragon gem, a stone of immense power, and, with a single blast, eradicated the Drun. Those humans who had been turned to stone by the Drun came back to life, but the dragons who had perished did not. With only one source of dragon magic left in the world, humanity fought over the precious gem, which resulted in the land of Kumandra being divided into 5 regions. Generations later, after a seemingly harmonious gathering of the tribes, brokered by Heartland's chieftain Benja, Daniel Dai Kim, goes wrong. The dragon gem is broken into 5 pieces, allowing the Drun to return. The titular Raya, Kelly Marie Tran, now seeks out Sisu, the Last Dragon, to rebuild the gem, destroy the Drun for good, and be reunited with her father Benja after the Drun turned him to stone. As you'd expect from a Disney production, Raya and the Last Dragon looks gorgeous. The movie's brief 2D segments, much like the tattoo scenes in 2016's Mona, are as polished as its 3D elements. and add a refreshing change of pace when they are utilized. Rhea's 2D sequences and images are mainly reserved for its historical context, but it works well in separating the present-day events from those that took place in Kumandra's past. Speaking of Mona, that movie's water animation effects have been improved further in Raya and the Last Dragon, given the significance of water as a life-giver in Southeast Asian culture, ensuring that the aquatic flow, ferocity, and reflections in each had to be on point. Thankfully, every river, waterfall, and rainstorm looks as realistic as can be expected. That extends into the film's other Southeast Asian values and heritage. For the most part, Raya and the Last Dragon authentically replicates these elements well. Combat styles employed by Raya and adversary Namari, Jimichan, such as Pencak Silat and Muay Thai respectively, have their roots in Malaysia and Thailand, while food items including a take on Thailand's Tom Yum soup feature heavily throughout. Add in historically accurate clothing, architecture, and traditions, such as the removal of footwear in spiritual places, and Raya and the Last Dragon is a film steeped in Asian culture. It's indicative of Disney's strides towards promoting inclusion within its fictional worlds. The utilization of a Southeast Asian story trust, composed of experts and Disney's own employees with roots in that region, and visits to Vietnam and Indonesia, among other Southeast Asian nations, have paid dividends in that respect. Misfiring humor, striking set pieces. That isn't to say that Raya and the Last Dragon gets everything right. The movie has drawn criticism from some quarters for its lack of Southeast Asian actor castings, and it's a valid concern to raise given that the movie is based upon this region. Raya's cast ultimately sticks the landing, more on this later, but it feels like Disney missed an opportunity here. The humor on offer is very hit and miss, too. There are some laugh-out-loud moments in Raya, but for every one of those, there are 2 or 3 jokes that struggle to land. It feels as if the movie's dark, underlying tone of mistrust and disunity, one that hits close to home thanks to 2020's worldwide upheaval, took precedence over its light-hearted shtick. Awkwafina is a goofy portrayal of suicide. Raya and the Last Dragon fails to raise more than a smile in most instances. While Raya's comedic moments aren't all that, its cast thrives everywhere else. Tran and Awkwafina's buddy relationship is a joy, and the juxtaposition between Raya's cynical worldview and Sisu's optimism work well in tandem. Chan's portrayal of the conflicted Namari, too, is solid, while Isaac Kwong and Benedict Wong, as Bao and Tong, provide strong supporting roles. Alan Tudyk is on fine form with his animal roar repertoire for Raya's armadillo-cum-dog companion Tuk Tuk, and it wouldn't be surprising if stuffed toy versions of Raya's steed fly off the shelves, such as his cute demeanor. Unlike Disney's other recent original productions, Raya and the Last Dragon doesn't come packed with musical numbers. That will be a disappointment, or relief, to some. But the lack of traditional sing-along tunes doesn't hinder the plot. If anything, it helps the story to flow, and James Newton Howard's score lends plenty of gravitas to emotional scenes and action-based sequences. Of those action-oriented moments, it's the choreographed battles that stand out. Raya's chase sequences are par for the course and all too brief, but skirmishes between Raya and Namari, thanks to those real-world fighting styles, fit seamlessly into Kumandra's fictional world. One such example plays out during the film's emotionally charged, action-packed finale, but it ends up taking a backstage role as Raya's merry band of outcasts attempts to stop the wider drone threat. Raya and the Last Dragon utilizes Disney's tried-and-tested formula to tell a compelling if cliché copyright-D story. Its attempt at cultural representation mostly hits the mark, but while there's plenty to like about the company's latest animated feature, some viewers may feel a tad underwhelmed by its lack of sing-along moments, humor, and lengthy action sequences.